Preseason week 2 got started with a thud, a tie. I had forgotten, frankly, that they stopped playing the preseason games. That's been around for a few years now, that they just call it quits when the clock strikes 0 in the fourth quarter and they don't play an overtime session. And that's good. You don't want any more live reps. It's all practice. It's all a glorified scrimmage. We don't need to continue this process. We call it a tie and we go home 18-18. It was a 2-point conversion by the Eagles that made it 18-18. And it was a couple of opportunities for rookie kicker Cade York to win the game that kept it 18-18. We'll talk about that coming up. The quarterback position is always the thing that draws the attention, and Deshaun Watson, who knows how he's going to look this year. But they got something in Dorian Thompson-Robinson. They got something. They got a guy who can play. Now, when will he get opportunities to play in the regular season? Not anytime soon when you got a quarterback who's making $46 million a year fully guaranteed. But they got something they can work with Dorian Thompson-Robinson, a guy whose skill set will track what Deshaun Watson does. So if Watson would get injured, you can run the offense. You don't have to make dramatic changes. You don't need offense A and offense B. So many teams have starter and backup who are so different, you have to have 2 different playbooks. They can pull this off with DTR backing up Deshaun Watson, and it feels like sooner than later that's where we're going to be. Maybe not this year. Josh Dobbs will be number 2, most likely. I love that throw. What a throw that was. Yeah. What a throw that was. When he let go of the ball, it's like, uh-oh, rookie. And it's like, damn, 12-year veteran. So I was impressed with what we saw from Dorian Thompson-Robinson last night.
Yeah, Mike, I think a couple weeks ago when after the Hall of Fame game, I kept calling him like a chaos agent. I think he's kind of progressed in the last few weeks from that kind of player to one where you can say, all right, you're a legitimate backup here. You feel like you can really work with somebody. He feels like a more legitimate player and somebody that can pilot the offense. And I think that that's a really good thing. I also think that a lot of it has to do with his starting experience in college. I mean, I'm about Brock Purdy, Gardner Minshew, like those guys who started a ton of games at the college level. DTR did that at UCLA, right? 48 starts over the course of 5 years, which made it feel like he was there forever. But I think when you have that level of experience at the college game, it helps you transition to the league so that not everything is too big for you. I mean, that early on in the game, he's got a free blitzer coming and he knows, all right, I got to get the ball out of my hands and into the hands of my hop, who's the running back on the left side. I love that. You don't necessarily see that from a young quarterback that often. So I agree with you. I think the Browns have something to work with here, and that's only good for them as they try to establish a long-term backup.
That's right. And maybe you can flip him for, a mid-round pick or something better than that later in his contract if Deshaun Watson ends up working out. Deshaun Watson is the big question mark here, and he said last night during the broadcast he'd like to play a quarter in the preseason finale against the Chiefs. After the game, Coach Kevin Stefanski said, basically, I'll let you know he shouldn't have spilled the beans. And I think he actually used the spilled the beans line. So even in the preseason, everyone's really guarded. Even in the preseason, we got to watch what we say. There are strategic objectives that are on the line for our meaningless game in Kansas City to wrap the preseason on August 26th. Thompson-Robinson also had a moment last night that, and the rule is the rule. The blindside block rule, and it's not just blindside, it's very technical, and it used to be a play that would get people to just kind of pop out of their seats when they'd see a block like this, but he got flagged for throwing the blindside block, and it is what it is, and if you're moving toward or the parallel, I'm not even sure that that's a good call. You're supposed to be moving.
It's there.
He came back that way. That's it. That's it. Yes. Yeah. That's when you can't do it
on the broadcast
because you're moving back to what? It got fooled by the first block. When you're moving back towards your goal line, you can't hit the guy, and they've made that a point of emphasis. It's a safety issue, and he got flagged for it. But it's the kind of thing that teammates see that, and they kind of like it out of a quarterback.
Well, yeah, you like it to a certain extent, right? You see that he is putting in the effort to make sure that everything he can do on a play, he can do. And you love that. He's a rookie. He's getting in there. He's getting his feet wet. He's playing. And again, that's something that he did at UCLA. It's nothing new. That's just the way he plays. It's his style. However, if you do end up being a backup quarterback, right, you can't go in and do these kinds of things, because at a certain point, you're putting yourself at risk. And if you are the backup quarterback and you're playing in a game, that means that something bad happened to the starter. So you don't necessarily want to see too much of that. But I think you'd always rather have it where you got to pull a guy back than you have to push a guy forward, you know? So that kind of effort, love it. Just let's maybe think about what we're doing here, and maybe we got to make a business decision or two at some point. But, you know, to establish yourself as a rookie in the preseason, I can't say that there's anything wrong with it other than the fact that it was a penalty.
Well, and it almost would have been on the line of unnecessary roughness. Now, the play was still going on, but it just felt like one of those, I just want to take a shot at this guy, and who knows what precipitated it or preceded it among the two, but it seemed like it had a level of animosity to it that a normal block wouldn't have. Regardless, it was a blindside block, and it's a rule that the NFL will aggressively enforce. Never mind the fact that the NFL has its head buried in the sand with all of these fights we're seeing in the joint practice sessions, and there's more and more noise about it. Am I wrong? Am I wrong to not understand and to try to get the NFL to give a crap about all these fights we're seeing? There was a helmet flying yesterday at the Packers-Patriots joint practice. You got a guy in Washington who's got a rotator cuff injury because he was slammed to the ground by Mark Andrews after a play. I just can't reconcile, nor can anyone else, the fact that they micromanage everything these guys do during a game, but it's open season. It's boys will be boys during these joint practice sessions. Just go beat the hell out of each other. We don't care. You can't reconcile the two. You just can't. And when I see the flag for blindside block on a hit that looked like, 1% of some of the hatred and the hostility we've seen in these joint practice sessions, it's laughable that the NFL does nothing about it and cares nothing about what goes on at these practices. They control everything else these guys do. But you get into joint practices, you get at training camp, go do whatever you want. We don't care. We got better things to worry about.
I think, we were going to talk about this later on in the show. But
we will. But I just got triggered by it. I got triggered by it.
I know.
We will talk about it later. Among the hodgepodge of crap for today, it is one of the topics. But I'll give you a little taste of it in advance. A little preview.
Yeah, hatred and hostility, I think, also is a little bit strong there. It's just an emotional game, and guys get a little bit riled up. I don't know about hatred and hostility.
The emotion is hate. The emotion is hate.
Okay.
That's what happens.
I don't think the emotion's hate. I think it's just, you're a little riled up, and maybe sometimes you get frustrated, and sometimes that frustration boils over, but I don't know that it ever really ventures into hate. But what I was going to say about DTR on the block.
It's okay, Greg. I hate some things too. Like what? Go ahead.
I have no idea what you're referencing there. What was that? What was that?
Nothing. That's for me to know and you to find out. That's for me and everyone else watching to know and for you to find out. Great. Why don't we hear from DTR and Coach Kevin Stefanski about the illegal blindside block while we regroup?
That's still a work in progress, but I have a sweet spot for Spelt. When he runs the ball, I got to stick my nose in there. So, Coach Stefanski definitely let me have it after that one. No penalties, so I'll definitely have to work on that going forward.
I didn't like that penalty, and he knows that rule that you can't block back. I love the kid's effort. I love the feistiness. I love that he wants to throw his body around, and his teammates love that. But I don't love hurting the team with a penalty.
And that's the key. And that's why that's why the extracurricular stuff is usually frowned upon by the coaches during practices, because you want to learn how to practice the way you play, and you play the way you practice, and yada, yada. You get the 15 yards of field position because there was a little something. There was some emotion that was coming from DTR when he threw that illegal blindside block, and they try to iron that out. But you're right. It's better to have the fire on and have to crank it down than to sit there with a couple of rocks trying to get the fire going on some of these guys.
Yes, it is. And look, 10 to 15 years ago, that's a play that would have been praised, right? And it wouldn't have been a penalty. Think about how many times Hines Ward did something like that against the Ravens or against the Bengals or against my Browns, where everybody was like, oh my gosh, that's incredible. And so like, you got to take the good with the bad sometimes. And like Kevin Stefanski said, you love the effort, don't love the penalty, don't commit the penalty, please. Especially not as a quarterback. Don't throw your body and put it in harm's way when you're a backup.
Hi, it's Mike Florio. Thanks for watching PFT on YouTube. Hit subscribe for the latest news and analysis from Pro Football Talk.